Thérèse is always saying, if whatever God wants, and if the sufferings increase, He'll give me the strength to bear it. And so, not worrying about the future. She doesn't know how many more days she has to go. She says, even if he wants me to recover and go on and do other things, that's fine, as long as it's what He wants. So she puts all that with confidence, puts the future in God's hands. You don't have to worry about what's gone before, and you don't have to worry about what's to come, because if you really trust in God, God's going to be there for you.
Praise be Jesus Christ, and welcome back to another episode of CarmelCast. CarmelCast is a production of the Institute of Carmelite Studies. For more information, you can visit our website at www.icspublications.org. My name is Father Pier Giorgio, and I'm joined today by Father Stephen Payne, professor at Catholic University in Carmelite Studies, and talking to us today. We're continuing our season here on Thérèse, and today in particular we want to talk about confidence and this great message of Saint Thérèse of speaking about confidence. Kind of carries over from our episode from last week. Remember, we were talking about how Thérèse had made this great discovery of being able to rely on that elevator of the hands of the Lord to lift her up in her littleness, in her brokenness, and let God the Father do that hard work of changing us, right? And we have to be cooperative with that change. And just as in that episode, speaking about hope and the Jubilee of Hope, we wanted to bring in a theme, which we talked about last time as well, but an important theme in her writings, which is the theme of confidence. And this great line in her letter, a letter she wrote to her sister Marie, of "It is confidence and nothing but confidence, which must lead us to love," and this becoming the kind of head title of a apostolic exhortation by our former Holy Father, Pope Francis, C'est la confiance, which is the direct quotation of that letter on the confidence in the merciful love of God. So, Father Stephen, welcome, and
Thank you.
It's good to have you back to talk with us and continuing this season on Saint Thérèse. So, if you had to define what confidence means to Saint Thérèse, how would you put that in a short, pithy way?
Well, it probably won't be short and pithy, but I would probably begin by saying what it's not.
Yeah.
We tend to think of confidence in terms of self-confidence, and I always remember, for example, what Maria sings in The Sound of Music about "I have confidence in me," and that's not what Thérèse is talking about. In Story of a Soul, elsewhere in The Little Way, it's all about confidence in the merciful love of God. It's so. A lot of times people will say we should translate it more as trust than confidence, because confidence can sometimes sound like self-confidence to us, and that's not what she's talking about, I think.
Yeah. So the French word that's being translated there in confidence in English is confiance, which is a cognate from French. We have the trust in English as well, which would have more of Germanic roots. Father John Clark, who is the translator of Thérèse's writings, does use trust in certain situations, but I think when he uses trust, he's using it to translate the verb form. So, it's not in French; it'd be espérer.
Yeah.
He's using it when trust comes up. I don't know. I've always liked the translation of it into confidence, because to me, confidence has like this habitual kind of just like wildness to it of like it's not just like I can put my trust, or someone asks me, do you trust me, and what's going through my head is, well, not really, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, or something like that. Maybe trust has this more of a sense in everyday language of being, I don't know, weaker in some sense than confidence, whereas confidence is something that's like habitual. I don't have to worry about it because I have my trust in this person is so habitual that it has become like a sort of confidence that is just like, I don't have to worry about it. He's got it, or she's got it, in the context of whatever he or she has. So it's an interesting question though, because we do misuse this quite often, and the world likes to tell us to have you need self-confidence,
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 right. Yeah.
and that's how you get all of the girls, and if you're a guy, and this is the kind of the worldly thinking
You have
in
to
which,
project self-confidence,
yes,
right? Yeah.
project your self confidence and to really kind of puff yourself up in many respects, and that's not at all what Thérèse is talking about. She's speaking about kind of like the way that I always frame it is it's like that playground confidence of my dad can beat up your dad type of mentality with respect to God, right? That God is the one who has the power, and I don't need to have the confidence because, I'm his adopted son, and so that alone brings me is everything I need in a sense with respect to what other people are threatening me with or whatever.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this wasn't something that came easy for Thérèse either, that she had to work on developing this confidence because, I mean, we know about her childhood and all of the difficulty she encountered, and she was an anxious child and so on, and to learn how to trust in God so completely was something that she grew into,
Hmm.
I think, over time.
Yeah,
And
it's not a self-made confidence.
right,
It's
yeah,
it's a over the course of her lifetime coming to realize the goodness of God and the just overwhelming love of God and His mercy towards her. And she's not just for her either. It's not like, oh,
right.
I have confidence in God because He's done for me, but she recognizes that something that is offered to all of us, which is why she's writing, right? She's writing as she wants to, why would this confidence not be yours? She writes to her sister Marie when Marie kind of doubts that this has anything to do with her or a message for her at all. And it's not about kind of a self-made or kind of puffing herself up, but it's really that lifelong denial of that self-reliance, and to grow in that more full reliance on God. And this is what causes kind of that exponential growth for her with respect to God's got this, and I usually don't. So better to rely on Him than on myself. And I think this is kind of her what she learns over the course of her lifetime. And she doesn't frame it either in sort of this, and she's a doctor of the church, and maybe we can talk about that as well. But it's not framed in the sense of like a faith of a competence of faith or something like that, where you only arrive at this confidence once you know more enough about God, or you've had enough broken experiences in your life. Because it's not about like, oh, I've gone through more in my life, therefore I have the power to be more confident in God as opposed to myself. She really invites it for all of us, and it's kind of comes from, I think, just it's really the exact opposite of a competence. It's more of I don't need to have the competence because I have confidence. It's God is the one who is speaking in these moments in my life that are difficult, that are full of suffering, these crosses that I encounter in my life, and He's the one who is walking with me in those things, and I don't have to go it alone. And I think that's her discovery, and kind of going towards this boldness of walking with God in all things.
And I think it particularly stands out given the culture, the French Catholic culture in which she's raised, which is still tainted with Jansenism in many ways and so on, and so tends to undermine your confidence in God. That you spend a lot of time being worried that God is angry with you, and what can I do to make sure that that I don't go get condemned, and so on. And I know that there were some nuns in the Carmel at Lisieux who thought she was a little too confident because that wasn't their spirituality. So I mean, she was, groundbreaking in many ways with this stress on confidence, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you have like this Jansenistic, if you take the Jansenistic route, it's kind of like I'm confident that I'm probably going to hell, which is not a way to live your life. I don't recommend it. But certainly we need to be, not have confidence in our sinfulness as a way of how we're going to get through this life with any success with respect to our eternal life. But certainly that was kind of you have to kind of do merits in order to like make up for get all that justification and merits in order so that you can kind of, I don't know, cover your brokenness or trick God or something to thinking that somehow you're better than you are. And I think that was that kind of next step or next sort of thought that comes from kind of that Jansenistic tendency is what she was also rejecting, which is that sense of that it's not about what you can do. It's not about
Right.
your merits. It's not
Right.
about how many acts of reparation you make,
Right.
but rather simply going and walking and being with Him. And
Yeah.
I think it has a much more it's much more open to a life of prayer, because it opens ourselves up in our time of prayer more fully to just being with Him. And when we're with God, we are doing the work that we need to be doing. And it has little to do with our merits or our ability to stay focused or any of these things. It's all about just spending that time. And I think there it's growing that relationship. It's very Theresian in that sense. It's all about how do we grow in confidence in a friend while we spend time with them and we learn that they are someone to be trusted.
And that stress on confidence and merciful love too shifts the focus away from looking at ourselves and whether we're, as you're saying, whether we're meriting and all of that, and puts the focus where it should be, on God. And so it helps us to get out of our own little treadmill of self-preoccupation and put the focus on God's mercy.
I think confidence too has a lot to do with just in general. It's maybe a synonym even for the little way in a big respect, because well, maybe we can start with what is the little way not, I guess, for Thérèse.
Well, we were talking about this before. I mean, I'm teaching a course on Thérèse now, and you so often come across explanations of the little way that will just say, well, it means doing ordinary things with extraordinary love. And as I've looked into that, I mean, I think that phraseology actually comes from Mother Teresa. I've never found it in Thérèse as such. And Thérèse doesn't want to focus on, she does the little things with great love, but she was already doing that before she discovered the little way. And the little way was rather moving the focus from trying to earn God's love by all these little things, and just throwing ourselves into the arms of merciful love with total trust and abandonment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think confidence, abandonment, like these themes are very connected. And she speaks at great length about abandonment. Her great prayer of the act of oblation to merciful love is all about abandonment, abandoning herself into the will and arms of the Father. And so I think that's another kind of important aspect about Therese's spirituality that we have to always maintain and advocate for. That it's not that Thérèse is not a doctor of the church in a sense because of a discovery of, you can do little things with great love, because that brings in I don't want to even really get into it, but it brings in a lot of questions about, like, well, what is great love? Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? Is it like great feeling of love? Is it how little are the things? Like, so all of these kind of aspects and questions. And for her, it's doesn't matter what it is or what you feel. It's about the fact that you're abandoning yourself to God, despite whatever your feelings or thoughts on the matter might be.
And that's what she tries to tell her sister Marie, who, when she reads that chapter 9 in Story of a Soul about Thérèse wanting to be a martyr and a priest and an apostle and all of those things, and Marie is kind of saying, oh, wow, that's too much for me because I don't feel that same zeal. And Thérèse says, well, that's not what it's about. It's, if you have those feelings, well, good for you, but it's even better if you don't have those feelings and you still trust in the Lord, because what matters is the trust and the confidence. God's not looking for, she says, loving our littleness is what pleases him.
Yeah, I think she says that God gives me those desires because he knows that I need them because I'm weak. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to move forward in many respects. So it's the great desires of what Thérèse had. And we can look at that, and I think Marie even says, I feel like the rich young man in the gospel, because I see all your love and I walk away sad because I don't have it.
Yeah.
And she says, that's not at all what I think that this is. She said, and that's where she comes. It's confidence, nothing but confidence.
Yeah.
And
That phrase comes from that letter. Yeah.
Well, good. I think that aspect of boldness and littleness and weakness, and And so if you look at it this way, just to kind of close up that last thought, or that the previous thought we were talking about, of that kind of nisomer versus what Thérèse is talking about with confidence and that worldly self-confidence, if you define it as like this boldness and weakness, then it's the exact opposite of what the world is saying that self-confidence, or Maria von Trapp is saying in The Sound of Music. It's the opposite of that. Thérèse says, I think it's in chapter 4 of Story of the Soul, she says, I can't trust in my own merits because I have none, right? And so that's where she kind of begins that sort of trajectory of thinking, at least on this boldness and littleness and confidence. I want to talk for a little bit about kind of Thérèse's life and how this theme of confidence really springs up, because she connects it oftentimes to her own woundedness. I mean, littleness, woundedness, I think are synonymous in that respect. But we know from Thérèse's life of kind of loss, and particularly maybe even an abandonment wound in her life as a result of loss in her life. So we remember, there's at least 4 times where Thérèse kind of loses a mother figure in her life, right? So there's the first time was when her mother Zélie is unable to nurse Thérèse, and so she loses kind of access to her mother in a permanent way early on as an infant. She's sent to a wet nurse, Rose Taillé, to be nursed for almost over a year.
Something like that.
Yeah, some number of months. And then taken from Rose Taillé. So the second time she loses kind of the mother figure in her life. The third time when she's 4 years old, her mother dies. Saint Zélie dies from breast cancer, so 3 times. And then Pauline leaves the house to enter the Carmel.
Whom she had taken as her mother after Zélie died. Yeah.
Right. So I think Céline says, "Well, Marie will be my mother because she's the
Exactly,
oldest,
yeah.
and because Pauline's the second oldest."
Yeah.
Then Thérèse says, "Well, Pauline will be my mother."
Yeah.
Well, then Pauline goes off to enter the Carmel when I think Thérèse is 10 or so, and so that's 4. And then
Marie goes.
And then Marie goes. And Marie was kind of like taught her, was a kind of her homeschool teacher
And was her godmother too.
and her
so-
godmother.
Yeah.
And so 5 times then of losing kind of this mother figure in her life. And certainly as a child, I mean, you can imagine losing your mother at 4 years old and how that would be affected in a child. But even as an infant, maybe we don't think about that as often, kind of the impact that has on a child as well. But certainly a lot of confusion. And even Saint Zélie identifies some of this in her own letters of like something, there's something up here with respect to Thérèse's kind of clinginess even when she's 1 or 2 years old. And so even Zélie kind of points a finger at something unique about Thérèse in this sort of maybe issue or wound of abandonment in her life. But it's I think this is transformed over the course of her lifetime, partly because she has I call Saint Louis Martin the world's greatest girl dad, who gets five daughters into 4 into the Carmel of Lisieux and a 5th and into the Visitation Sisters, and so that's pretty incredible as well. But that aspect of fatherhood in her life was very steady. Not to downplay anything with Saint Zélie either, but it's just the matter of fact of losing her so young.
Yeah, and he's in many ways very maternal toward his daughters. So that's
Yeah.
Well, that's maybe what you mean by saying he was the best girl dad, having to play something of the mother's role too. And
Sure. Yeah. Having to play both roles after the death of his wife, certainly. But in any case, like for Thérèse, whatever is there, and she even points to it later in life when she writes Story of His Soul, because when Pauline leaves to go to the Carmel, she has this sort of depressive episode or something. I think she talks about it in chapter 3 of Story of His Soul, where she has like this guilt about, because she's kind of catatonic, and yet to everyone's appearances, and yet she relates it in such a way where she has guilt or doubt about the veracity of her illness, because she was able to understand everything that was going on. looking back at it, she doesn't see it as the same way that other people report it to her from her childhood. And so there was some issue here with respect to her stability in life, losing that mother figure for the fourth time in her life when Pauline goes off to Carmel. But in any case, this is when the miracle of the Blessed Virgin smiling at her, and some sort of grace comes into her life, and it is transformative for her.
And she gets a mother there who won't leave her. Mary is
Yeah. I think maybe there's this aspect of having been abandoned again, and I know we're psychologizing someone who lived a long time ago, but there's an aspect there of healing, right? That the Blessed Mother will always be with her, and that she need not fear because of that presence in her life of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
And as you say, I mean, when they make her go to the Carmel and try to explain what happened, and she didn't want to talk about it, but that makes her, because she has trouble explaining it, it makes her begin to wonder, was she just faking it? Or, like a kid who says, I don't want to go to school, I got a stomach ache today, or something like that. So it caused a lot of uncertainty to her, which only later was she able to overcome when she was finally able to visit the shrine of Our Lady of Victories there in Paris when they went on the pilgrimage. Mm-hmm. But she had a lot of things that caused self-doubt or uncertainty. What could she put her confidence in?
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing is just in the midst of I mean, so there's you can go to a bookstore and find all manner of books about what to do in your life when you feel wounded and broken, and bad advice all over the place with respect to these things. And I think a lot of what the world would say would be, you just have to, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and or you can go the other route. You can just blame everything on some condition you have, which is also not going to be helpful for you. And so I think what Thérèse is offering to us is that it's not a pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, but it's also not a blaming on the weakness. It's a going to that place of transformation that God desires for us, and that's the only way. That's the only way that makes any sense. Is that okay? This is problematic. This is broken in your life, and then let's take it to God for Him to transform and to elevate, to supernaturalize, and so. This grace, it builds upon her nature. It transforms aspects of her brokenness, her fragility. And it begins in her life this acceptance of certain insufficiencies, maybe looking back at her childhood and seeing some of her silliness too in various ways. And giving that to God and letting him be the kind of the constant, letting him be the thing that is stable in her life always. And I think that's what really transforms her from this child Thérèse to moving towards the 33rd Doctor of the Church Thérèse. I wonder if you have any thoughts about kind of confidence and her being a Doctor of the Church.
Well, it's interesting because that's what, I mean, in this letter, the C'est la confiance that Pope Francis wrote, this apostolic exhortation, he links that. He says that's key to the little way, and the little way is the key to her doctrine. And he says that she's not a Thomas Aquinas or anything, but she's a synthesizer.
Yeah.
And she brings everything together in this theme in a way that people can understand. And,
he calls her the Doctor of Synthesis,
yeah,
which I always thought was fun.
Yeah,
because he's pointing at something in her that is lived. Mm-hmm. It's lived, and it's not in the books, it's not in the head, but it's an everyday kind of acceptance of what today's crosses are, and not worrying about the suffering of tomorrow or the anger at being of what you didn't accomplish yesterday, but simply kind of that synthesizing, taking these mysteries of our life with God and concretize them in the everyday.
Here's what he says in the second paragraph of the letter. He says, Confidence, nothing but confidence is the sole path that leads us to the love that grants everything. With confidence, the wellspring of grace overflows into our lives. The gospel takes flesh within us and makes channels of mercy for our brothers and sisters. And it's confidence that sustains us daily and will enable us to stand before the Lord on the day when he calls us to himself. So he's saying that, yeah, I think he's right that he's kind of the whole of her teaching can be is implicit in this approach to confidence, that she has absolute confidence in merciful love. Yeah.
So I think this is kind of where we can see that aspect of her message and how it applies to everyday life, because especially she talks about, I gave a conference recently on, I mentioned this in the last episode too, so now we're gonna have to present it in some way for YouTube and on the podcast. But Thérèse talks a lot about sleep, and I think the reason why is because she never got enough of it. Like in the Carmelist view, I don't think they slept enough. But she speaks about rest and sleep with respect to abandonment so often, and I think that this is an important aspect of her message, especially with confidence, because it was what allowed her to let go at the end of the day and to rest in the arms of the Father and to rest into the embrace of her pillow. And and I think so often what a lot of people struggle with today is letting go, at the end of the day, and getting caught up either in anger about the past or fear about the future. And we've spoken in the last episode a lot about how hope is this, and I think confidence goes right along with this, is this living in today, living in the present moment. And a lot of that has to do with, can I let go of this at the end of the day, literally at the end of the day. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to be abandoned to the mercy of God in your failures and your successes and all things in your life, then you can get up the next day and, get out of bed and be ready to live your life for today with that aspect of confidence, because you have been living this life of abandoning yourself and your failures and your successes all to the the mercy and power of God, and you can just begin again. And it's sort of like this aspect of renewal that I think comes with her message of confidence, a daily renewal of, okay, what are today's crosses, and let's move on from yesterday's, and let's not even think about tomorrow's until that comes. And so I think this is an important thing too, of just abandonment, and that, I think that has practical application for everyday life. What's preventing us from both things, from falling asleep at night and from getting out of bed the next morning? And I think so oftentimes is that we're putting too much on our own abilities of what I have to do to accomplish these things, because that's always overwhelming, at least for me anyway. The overwhelming sense of what I have to accomplish in a day.
Well, I've been recently reading the Last Conversations, and I was saying that what strikes me is how often she's there in the infirmary and she's suffering terribly from tuberculosis without any kind of morphine or anything like that. And the sisters, I'm sure they're trying to be encouraging, but they're always coming in and asking her things like, well, do you think you're going to die today? Or will the sufferings increase? Or how will you feel about that if it happens? And so on. And Thérèse is always saying, if whatever God wants, and if the sufferings increase, He'll give me the strength to bear it, and so on. So she's able to avoid. I mean, if people were asking me that, it would be making me anxious about what's going to happen, and so on. And so not worrying about the future. She doesn't know how many more days she has to go. She says, even if he wants me to recover and go on and do other things, that's fine, as long as it's what He wants. So she puts all that with confidence, puts the future in God's hands. Mm-hmm. So as you're saying, you don't have to worry about what's gone before, and you don't have to worry about what's to come, because if you really trust in God, God's going to be there for you, whatever mm-hmm. may be.
Yeah, because I think oftentimes if we have this mentality of like, oh, something's coming around the river bend and I better be ready for it, then we can have this mentality in prayer about, I have to store up enough grace so that I can face what comes. And, that's not that's not going to help you in the sense of trying to store up enough grace that you have the extra juice to get through whatever suffering or difficulty is coming around the corner.
And that doesn't mean that she ever neglected prayer and
Right.
all those things too, but she just didn't put her confidence there
Right.
in how much time she spent praying or not. And so,
Or how conscious she was during that time, because
she
we know she
always
fell asleep.
Right.
She would frequently fall asleep during her Thanksgiving after communion.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it comes back to this aspect of abandonment that this time for prayer, it's not for what's coming up. It's not for so that it's not like lifting weights. I'll be strong enough to come into contact with whatever difficulty is coming up. So I'm strong enough or anything like that. It's just here I am for you, Lord. This is our time together, and
it's not passivity either, in the sense of, like we might think of abandonment just means you lay back and, whatever comes. But she's using every opportunity to show her love for God and so on. And she knows she's going to fail sometimes or not. That's not for her the thing. She wants to be as generous as she can, but if she isn't always as generous as she'd like to be, well, just leave that and move on. Just because she's not trusting in what she accomplishes, even though she keeps working, with God's grace to serve Him in whatever ways she can. But that's not where her confidence is not in that. It's in God's mercy.
Yeah. I can't remember where she says this, but she says somewhere something to the effect of, every failure that I have is an opportunity for God for His mercy, or something to that effect. Maybe that's a vile misquote of her or something, but it certainly rings true with her general message of just if there's one thing that God can do, it's to be merciful. We don't have to doubt that. We don't have to doubt His mercy, and certainly we don't think that we're so much somehow excluded from it, or that something is so big that He can't. God, of the universe, can't forgive and can't cover with His mercy.
In fact, well, I mean, the story of his soul opens with that whole image of the garden, and that even the littlest flowers. It's the nature of love to lower itself and so on, and that sort of gives God the opportunity to be more merciful to those who are more in need. So, I mean, she looks on that, even her woundedness, her failings, and so on, are a greater opportunity for God to show His merciful love. So it all works out.
Yeah.
It didn't come easy for her
Right.
either. It's something she had to work on to arrive at that level of trust. Because, I mean, there are times when, she kind of struggling a little bit again with scruples and other things like that. And she just had to kind of always say, no, trust and love and abandonment. So, yeah.
So make sure you're taking your daily dose of trust and abandonment, and the trust in the morning.
In addition to whatever medications you've been assigned, yeah.
But that dose of trust in the morning, and that dose of abandonment at night before bed, I think is living this confidence in a real way, because I think otherwise we get stuck in kind of that over analyzing, over dwelling on our failures. And certainly the greatest thing we can do to deny our self-reliance is to bring all of these things to the sacraments, especially confession in the Eucharist, as a form of confidence in God and what He can do for us, and the remedies for all of our sins, certainly, those sacramental remedies for sin. I wanted to close maybe, and what time are we at now? 33. Okay. I wanted to close maybe speaking about an aspect of confidence and identity that I think comes from Thérèse's message. And if you look at Genesis and Genesis chapter 2 with the fall of Adam and Eve in the garden, and many theologians have spoken about the fall as sort of the loss of confidence, man's loss of confidence in God, and how the serpent chips away at Adam and Eve's confidence in God. And how this confidence in God is restored in Jesus Christ. God chases us into the flesh. The Word becomes flesh and dwells among us, and He sends His Son to chase us into our fleshly pastimes, in existence. And so this aspect of the relentless chasing after us of God, and therefore, how can we not have confidence in Him? If someone would do this to rescue us from our sinfulness, from sin and death, and the image that always comes to mind, and I stole it from somebody else who gave a talk on this years ago that I attended, but comes from that scene in The Lion King, which I think is the crux of the movie. My favorite movie. It's been my favorite movie since it came out in theaters when I was 6 years old. But in any case, it's the scene where Simba is rediscovered, as a young man, and he says to Rafiki the monkey, I used to know who I was, but now I'm not so sure anymore. He's sort of losing his identity in many respects to this message of, don't worry, every little thing's gonna be all right. Kind of a combination of Bob Marley and Hakuna Matata, or how you want to say it, but this aspect of just, I used to know who I was, and Rafiki says, well, I know your father, and he's still alive. And so much of Simba's lack of confidence comes from the fact that he thinks he's responsible for his father's death, that he's been tricked in this way. And so Rafiki takes him to the oasis, this watering hole, and shows him his reflection. He says, there's your father, he lives in you. And Simba has this imaginative vision. I don't really know how that works in humans, let alone in lions, but he has some kind of imaginative vision, and his father appears to him and says, you have forgotten who you are. You have forgotten who you are because you have forgotten me, because you have forgotten who you are, and this whole aspect of you've forgotten your father. You've forgotten you had a father, and yet I've been with you this whole time, but you've forgotten who you are, and so you've forgotten who I am. And he gives him this message of remembering, of a reminder to him of, you are my son. You are my son. And he also says, you are more than what you've become. And I think this with talking lions and a warthog and a meerkat too, of showing us a little bit about what it means to have an identity in the Father, and what that means in terms of being an adopted son or adopted daughter of the Father. And this is what confidence really is remembering who you are, remembering that you are the son, you are a son or a daughter of God, and that is your identity. That is your identity, and nothing else. Because so often our sin and our shame makes us forget that. It's like, I've lost my birthright, or my right to claim God as my Father because of what I've done. But it's not lost so easily. At least in the sense of we can, if we do lose it, we can always run back to God and receive that birthright once more and restore our relationship with Him. But don't allow sin and shame to let you forget who you are, or certainly don't let your sin and shame become your identity, which I think is a lot of what the world is tending towards these days. Of like, whatever brokenness you have today, that's who you are, and so double down on that as explanation for all of your bad behavior, or why you are the way you are. When I think what Thérèse is teaching us, and what the Lion King teaches us, and what Scripture teaches us is so much about just falling into that identity and of being a son or daughter of the Father, and having confidence in that, and confidence in His mercy, and going back to Him when we need Him.
And I think another thing that the Pope mentioned, Pope Francis, is that, when we do that, it automatically reaches out to others too. Like, we can't help but, if we're sons and daughters of God, then we love what He loves. And that extent, Thérèse talks about drawing others in our train and so on, so that it's not just us finding our identity, but it has an impact on others too. And that zeal she had for spreading the word and being an apostle and so on is something that kind of is intimately tied up with kind of discovering who she is in Christ, and as a daughter of God and so on.
Yeah. Member of the body of Christ, and certainly that impetus, the apostolic impetus to go then and make disciples.
Yeah.
to teach people of this message of God's mercy, and that you are more than what you've become. You are a son, you are a daughter of the Father.
Yeah. So it's not just me finding that out, but that if I, as I find that, I'm bringing others to that same realization, hopefully, or inviting them to it, because it's obviously a work of grace. So
Yeah, that's really good. I think the last little note that I had was to talk a little bit maybe about the Eucharist, because for her, obviously the Eucharist was a subject of great importance for her, but and for all of us. But as a food of confidence, and even the command that we're given, to do this in remembrance of me, do this in memory of me, that we hear at every Mass, of receiving the sacrament with this great confidence. Because it doesn't make any sense for us to receive the Eucharist if we're self-reliant, right? And because what is this going to do for you if you think you can do everything yourself? And so it's this opportunity that we're given daily. Canon law even says twice daily if you're at that point or have that opportunity, to remember who you are with respect to what God desires to give to you in your life, and to receive Him sacramentally, this often, daily, certainly is kind of the norm, and certainly weekly for those who can't daily. But the sense of you can't do this no matter on your own, no matter how clever you are, or how much confidence you have in your own abilities. There's something about it that's this is something that's completely dependent on Him condescending Himself to me in this moment of great intimacy, that I am able to receive Him and He's able to come into me in the sacramental way. And so I would say that to grow in confidence in God, I think, goes hand in hand with frequent reception of the Eucharist.
I was reminded of that letter she wrote to her cousin, Marie Guérin, when her cousin Marie had struggled with scruples just as Thérèse had done, and she'd gone to Paris and seen some of the museums and the beautiful nude sculptures and things like that, and she was feeling, could she go to communion after that? And Thérèse kind of says, she's making the point that the way she puts it in her letter, she says, it's impossible for a heart that rests only at the sight of the tabernacle to offend Jesus to the point of not being able to receive Him. What offends Him and what wounds his heart is the lack of confidence. So coming back to that, she's telling Marie to have confidence that you don't have to be perfect to receive the Eucharist, that's what's going to help you grow toward perfection, but it's food for the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even there, she connects Eucharist and confidence.
Yeah, and I think so often we start walking down the wrong path when we're getting away from trying to solve our own, when we're trying to solve our own problems, and walking away from the fact that God just desires to be with us and to make us, take the opportunity of when we find ourselves wounded and little to pick us back up again, and we just have to get out of His way. We can't be the one that's flailing about, making it squirming about, so it's impossible for Him to lift us up. I think so often what an unworthy reception of the Eucharist is that squirming about with respect to confidence in one's own ability and self, because it just doesn't make any sense to receive in that sort of sense of self-reliance.
Right. And I think Thérèse would say, yes, we should do everything we can to prepare ourselves worthily, but at the end of the day, none of us earns the Eucharist. It's God's gift.
Mm-hmm. Good. Anything else that we want to?
No, just I would encourage people to read the Apostolic Exhortation of Pope Francis, C'est la Confiance. It's available online very easily, and they even have printed up brochures of it too. So it's very concise, but it contains a lot of what we were talking about today. So,
yeah. No, it's a great, and in fact, I think Brother John Mary may have done a video shortly after it came out, kind of giving some more details. So maybe we can link that down below in the episode notes. You can get a little bit of his opinion, his hot take. We have to get him to re-record it now that it's been a year and a half. See if he thinks if it's still worthy. If he has still the same opinion of it. So just to remind everybody that the relics of Saint Therese are here in the United States. I believe they're heading now from Michigan to California as this episode airs. So if you're in the Los Angeles, Southern California area, I think all over the Southern California area, she'll be in. She's going to be in San Diego. She's going to be in San Bernardino area. She's going to be in Los Angeles proper. She's going to be, I think, even in Malibu. So she'll be all over Southern California. She's heading up to Northern California, the Bay Area, to Napa, as well as out to Sacramento area. From there off to San Antonio. And I forgot to mention last time she's going to Louisiana as well. And then by November, she'll be up in Wisconsin. And then she's going to be coming to the East Coast as well, to the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. And then finally, she'll be departing the U.S. from Miami, Florida. So all those places, good places to go to see her during these next few months. And we just encourage you to keep praying for the great graces that are going to be coming from her visit to these places. And we know that there's many miracles that have occurred as a result of her relics going around the world. And so pray for those people to be receptive to the grace that God wants to give to them. And we thank you for Father Stephen. Do you have anything else?
No, you'll put a link in for the website that has all of the places and schedules.
Yes, there'll be the St. Therese USA 2025.com is where you can find the itinerary of all those locations, and we'll put a link to that below as well. And we just want to thank you for joining us this week, and may God bless you.